Good evening, doctors and practitioners from all over the world. We welcome you. This is Dr. John Brimhall talking tonight, and we have a very long-time friend of mine with us, Vaughn R. Cook, OMD, who is the founder and CEO of Zyto. Many of our doctors through the years have used Zyto, and now many of the people are getting updated on the new technology that they have available, even long distance, being able to use a hand cradle wherever the patient is, and check people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. Dr. Cook doctor is in OMD, Oriental Medicine, and everything I've known about him for all these years is he was involved in this technology to where you can ask the body questions. Everything that happens in the world has an electronic signature, whether you have a dust or a pollen or an emotion, it has electronic signature. And he's been one of the developers of the technology to be able to evaluate what your body's dealing with and what does it take to rewrite the script so you're healthier. Dr. Cook, I'd like to a little bit know about your background here before you get started talking about not only Zyto, but also about the emotional work that you do. And this will be demonstrated at homecoming. So each one of our homecoming speakers, all of you will know out there that January 4, 5, and 6, we'll start 8 o'clock in the morning, and Sunday we'll go to about 12:30. So put your plane all tickets ready right now and get your room here in Arizona. But Thursday evening, the 3rd, we actually meet there. We have 10 different physicians that will be treating that night. Plus, if I know Dr. Cook, he'll be there with his team. You can actually start getting tested by the Zyto equipment. There's somebody there all weekend long. So you can see how it works on yourself. What can you do? What nutrition can you do? What emotional release techniques can you do to help yourself? Dr. Cook, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. It's good to be on. I appreciate the invitation to be here this evening. I'm as Dr. John mentioned, an Oriental medical doctor, and my background is in Eastern and Western medicine. I've got a lot of years of experience in technology. I've had a couple of clinics over the years. I'm not in active practice now, but have several years of active practice, so I know the challenges and the things that go into running a successful practice. And one of the advantages I think that brings to Zyto technology is that it's built with the practitioner in mind, and it's built not just to be a nice, system, but it's a system that you can actually put in practice and make money with. I want to talk this evening about perception reframing, and because it ties into emotions. And we have a technology at Zyto we call EVOX, and it does what's called perception reframing. And so let me dive into this so that we get through it fast. To begin with, it's valuable to know that everybody is blind. And I mean that in a physical sense as well as, all the other ways you might use it. In a physical sense, we have a blind spot, and the way you can identify where your blind spot is to take a piece of paper, and on the left side you put the letter R, and on the right side you put the letter L, and then you cover one of your eyes. And in this slide you see this young woman has got her right eye covered. So with her left eye, she will hold this paper. Well, she'll hold the paper up in front of her, and with her left eye she'll look at the letter L on the right side of the paper. And then she'll bring the paper in and out, closer or further away from her face. And at some point, the letter L will completely disappear off the page. And the reason why that happens is because all of us have a blind spot in the back of our eye. And when the reflection of the light coming from the L hits this blind spot, it disappears. You can't see it. That's a fun little exercise to show that we don't have complete vision. We're blind in another sense, and that is that there's a lot of information in the universe that we just do not perceive. And this can be demonstrated by this graph. This is the electromagnetic spectrum. On the left, we've got the short waves, and on the right, we have the longer waves. In the middle there, we have the section called visible light. These are the wavelengths that we can actually see with our eyes. If we took this line and we stretched it across the United States, so it went from San Francisco to Washington, D.C., that line, visible light, would be located somewhere in Kansas. We'd go out on the road close to Oberlin, Kansas, and on that road we'd see a line 2 feet wide. So of the electromagnetic spectrum that covers the United States, all we see is 2 feet of that line. That means that when we look at something like a tree, what we see is the tree, but it's only the tree that we can see. It's not the tree that's there in its entirety. If we could take that line that's 2 feet wide and expand it even 2 more feet, you would be able to see probably all of the life forms in the tree. You'd probably be able to see the diseases or the molds or the funguses that would be growing on the tree. There's lots of information that we just don't see because we're blind for the most part. That's important because perception creates reality. In other words, if you can't perceive it, it doesn't exist. At least it doesn't exist for you. Here's an example. This is a picture that you may or may not be familiar with. It's the picture of the old woman and the young woman. And if I say to you, can you see the old woman? You might say yes. And let me point it out here. I don't know if I can get my mouse to work. There we go. If you can see that mouse. This is the old woman's mouth right here. This is her chin. This is her nose. This is her eye. She has a scarf on and she's wearing a fur cape. That's the old woman. The young woman, this is her neck, and she's wearing a choker. And this is her left jawline. She's turning her face away from us to the right. Her nose is a little dot here. This is her eyelash, and this is her ear. So with perception, perception is an additive process. In other words, if I can see something one way today, and you show me another way to see it, I can still see it in its original form. So if I could see the old woman, but not the young woman, and you pointed out the young woman to me, it doesn't make me blind to the old woman. It just adds to my ability to perceive. It's kind of like this next slide. If I show you this picture and say, what is this? You would say, it's a balloon. And that's correct, it is. And then I say, well, what's this? Oh, this is a picture of a young girl. If I show you then the complete picture, you see that it's a balloon on the head of a young girl. Now, having shown that to you didn't change the fact that the balloon is a balloon and the young girl is a young girl, but now you see the entire picture. And so with perception, that's how it works. It's an additive process, and the older we get, the smarter we get, hopefully, and the more able we are to perceive different things. But perception is created through a filter, and the filter is our beliefs. Now, when I say beliefs, you might be thinking that, oh, he's talking about religion. Well, religion is a belief, but that's just a fraction of all the beliefs that we deal with. We have beliefs about the kind of food we should eat, or how fast we should drive our car, or what colors look good in the clothes that determines the clothes we pick. So all of these beliefs will filter our experience and create our perceptions. To the extent that our perceptions are, or our beliefs, I'm sorry, to the extent our beliefs are informed, we will have functional perceptions. But a lot of our beliefs are misinformed. I may have a bias about something that is incorrect. That would be an uninformed belief. And that bias then may change my perception or create a perception that is completely dysfunctional. I'll give you some examples of that as we go through. But here's a story to demonstrate that. There's a man who owned a restaurant, and his daughter worked for him. And she noticed that every day when her dad would put the ham into the oven, he would chop the end of the ham off. And one day she said to her dad, how come you cut the end of the ham off every time you put it in the oven? And he said, well, that's what my mom does. That's the way I learned to cook ham. The daughter thought, well, that's kind of goofy. So she called her grandma and she said, Grandma, how come you cut the end of the ham off every time you cut it or every time you cook it? And she said, my pan's too small. So her son had a misinformed belief that had cost him a lot of ham over the years. He thought that she was doing it for other reasons. And that's not atypical of the way these perceptions and our beliefs work. There is an actual physical component that creates emotion. We have in our brain a mechanism called a reticular activation system, and that part of our brain filters out the low level conversation that occurs in our body, because there's so much information our body processes that it would be overwhelming if we had to deal with it consciously. But sometimes things need to get through. For example, if you have a reason to be afraid, that would be an emotion. Or if you have a reason to, one example I like to use, it doesn't have a lot to do with just the emotion, but if you're going to have diarrhea, you kind of want that message to get through because there's consciously something you should do about that. But all of those communications that occur from the lower levels of our body come to us in terms of feelings. And we sometimes discount those feelings. We think, oh, that's just, it's a bunch of hooey because I can't identify any scientific basis for it. The fact of the matter is that emotions are actually created by proteins. So you get amino acids that organize themselves into peptides and fold themselves into proteins, and that's what creates an emotion. And the way it works is you have an experience. The experience is then filtered through to a perception, through your beliefs to a perception, and that will create an energetic response. The energetic response then organizes the amino acids into the proteins eventually, and that's what creates the emotion. And if you put that into this triad of health, emotion is a key component to how healthy you are. In Chinese medicine, emotions are associated with different organs. The emotion of grief is associated with the lung and the large intestine. And in the picture on the lower right, you can see the young woman there with the dots on her abdomen and her back. The abdomen points are called front mu points. The back points are back shu points. Those are trigger points. And if you have a problem with your, in this case, it would be large intestine, you'll actually be tender at those places. So a lot of times people who have low back, chronic low back problems, they actually have a large intestine problem. If you have a chronic problem, it can lead to an excess of grief. And it's possible for grief to actually impact the physiology of the large intestine and the lung. So all of these things tie together, and emotion is as significant a part of health as anything else we do. Here's another example of some back shu and front mu points. This is for liver. So those points become tender if there's a problem with the liver. We have points all over our body, acupuncture points. And one of the things that acupuncture points do for us is they connect us with our outside environment. They're really energetic portals. I like to think of them as satellite dishes. And they act to receive and to transmit energy into an outside and to the outside of our body. That's important because we have an environment that's much bigger than ourselves. We have an environment that includes the world and it includes the universe. And beyond that, it includes an area where all things come together, and that's sometimes referred to as the 0-point field. A field is a sphere of influence. Here's an example of a field. This is a magnet with a north pole and a south pole, and the lines between the two are called the flux lines. That magnet will have a sphere of influence. That magnetic field will be strong if the magnet is, it'll be big if the magnet is strong, It'll be small if the magnet is weak. But everything in the universe happens to have a sphere of influence. You have a sphere of influence. I have one. The English language has a sphere of influence. Algebra has one. Geometry, the United States of America, the country of Mexico. Everything has a sphere of influence. And the place where all those fields come together is called the 0-point field. One of the reasons it's called that is because if you sum everything in that field, it sums to 0. And the reason it does is because everything is opposed in some way by something else. You'll recognize this symbol as the yin-yang symbol. And the idea behind health in terms of the yin-yang is to have a balance between those two opposing forces. So the universe is built with opposition, and it's critical because without opposition, nothing can exist. One of the things that distinguishes humans from every other kind of animal is our opposing thumb. That thumb allows us to articulate with our hands, and we can do things that, for example, a horse cannot do. The other aspect of opposition is demonstrated by the woman lifting the weight. She's working her biceps to make it strong, but if she didn't have a triceps to oppose the biceps, she would lift that weight once and be stuck in that position. So she has to have opposition. She has to have opposing muscles. Another way to think of opposition is a constraint. In the case of this egg, the yolk and the white are constrained. They're held in place by the shell, which is really opposition, if you think of it in another way. Opposition isn't just good and evil. It's, up and down and in and out. And everything in the universe is opposed in a very complex way. So here we are in the 0-point field. And in addition to the young woman you see in the picture, you can see the pluses and minuses that represents everything else that's there. Now, in the 0-point field, she is maintaining a position. And that position is referred to sometimes as her energetic posture. Her energetic posture is created by her perceptions in large part. And perceptions are created by experience filtered through our beliefs. If she changes her energetic posture, she'll change her reality because perception creates reality. And again, if you don't perceive it, it doesn't exist, at least not for you. Have you ever had a friend who is challenged by something and they just don't seem to see what's obvious? They have a problem and they keep doing stupid things and not solving the problem. And you might look at them and say, why can't they see that problem? Why do they keep doing these stupid things? Well, the reason that they keep doing stupid things is because what they're doing is their perception of their best option. From the clinical experience I have with EVOX, I've come to believe that humans are built to always make their best choice. That's just the way we're built. Now, that doesn't mean that we always make our best choice. I mean, I can make a choice that's not in my best interest, but that's against my nature. My nature is, if you show me some options, I'm going to pick the one that I perceive as being in my best interest. And if that's true, then we don't need to condemn each other for making stupid decisions. We just need to show each other better options. And as those better options are made apparent to us, we'll naturally change. So what's a reliable way to determine perceptions? Let me back up because I don't know if this, maybe we're further on. Here we go. Yep, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, for a reliable way to determine perception is actually through the voice. The reason why voice is so reliable in this regard is because it takes your entire anatomy to create voice. And the words that you speak, it turns out, are just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, they're the tip of the iceberg. When you make voice, you have to engage your mind. You then engage your mechanical mechanisms to breathe in and breathe out, and you articulate with your vocal mechanisms. And in the process of doing that, you are incorporating your body memories, your beliefs, your attitudes. All of those things come through in the information that your voice carries. And so what we've done with Evox is we have figured out a way to record the energy in your voice. What you're seeing on the screen is called a perception index. It's made by about a 10-second recording. Someone, in this case, this young man, would be talking about a particular topic. And because voice is topic specific, what we're mapping are his perceptions relative to the topic. The gray area you see around the center circle is the total energy in his voice. The black area is the excess energy in his voice. And the colors you see are just there to help you interpret the data quickly. You can see that the one zone that has red, that's an extreme imbalance. The orange or the yellow, that's a high imbalance. And then green is moderate, blue is low, and the white areas are insignificant. They're pretty balanced. The computer looks at this perception index and it determines where there are holes or where is there information missing in this perception index. What Evox then does is it will send back, it's done through a field effect, through the 0 point field, but it's done through a field effect. The information that's missing in the voice is sent back to the person who is recording. And we've learned that your body at a subconscious level can perceive this information and can adapt it very quickly. And what happens is you will reframe your perception. In other words, you will have an epiphany, for want of a better word, and you will see options and alternatives that have not been obvious to you to begin with. You go through a session, so you can see there are a number of perception indexes on this chart, and you go through a session and the result will be a change in your voice, in your perception index, and that's an indication to us that your perception has been reframed, is what it's called. So perception reframing. Now, when you reframe your perception, you then change your energetic posture. And when you change your energetic posture, because you live in the 0 point field, other things in that field have to also change. Because remember, it all has to balance. It all has to sum to 0. So if your energetic posture moves from position A to position B, other things will accommodate that. There are different types of perception reframing, a couple of protocols that we use. One is called transgenerational perception reframing. This is a way to deal with miasm. So miasm is a genetic predisposition to a disease process. And some miasms show up as diseases, but some miasms show up as other things, like the guy who cut the ham off. You could call that a miasm if you wanted to. The other approach is just topic specific. You can use Evox to improve your ability to make money, or you can use it to actually improve your golf game. So perception plays into everything, and if you reframe your perception on any topic, you will improve your performance in that area because you will move from less information to more information, and it will be, I should say, misinformation to more information is how it works. I had a young woman who came into the clinic, into my clinic, this was several years ago, but she came in because she heard that we were doing things with Evox, and one of the things you can improve with Evox is relationships. She came in because her marriage was being challenged, and she didn't know if we could help her stay married, basically. So I ran her through the normal intake stuff, and we put her on the Zyto technology. I ran a scan on her, and she told me that, you know, she was having marital problems. That really was the reason that she was there. And the scan showed indications of depression. I was coming up with remedies and things and biomarkers that led me to ask her about it. I said, you know, are you having any depression? And she said, yeah, I just had a baby about 6 months ago, my second child, and ever since the baby was born, I've had this postpartum depression. I just can't seem to shake it. We talked more, and she told me about, you know, her husband had his own business and he was having financial challenges, and she had the new baby and the depression. There's lots of reasons why their marriage was having problems. Well, the next thing I did is I went into the transgenerational perception reframe. I won't explain that whole protocol to you, but we did a reframe on her mother. That's where we started this particular day. And the way you do that is she would just talk about her mother, and then the computer would send information back, and then she'd talk about her mother again in general terms. And it didn't take very many rounds, and her perception reframed about her mother. She went home. I gave her the supplements and things that I had determined to give her on the scan, and made an appointment to see her the next week. She came back in the next week, and she looked much better. Her countenance had lifted. She had more color in her face. Her eyes were shinier. And I said, wow, you look better. How you doing? And she said, oh, I'm doing a lot better. She said, but a funny thing happened to me last week when I went home. I said, what was that? And she said, my mother called. And I didn't respond. I didn't, you know, it was like, okay, I'm waiting for the funny thing that happened. Your mother called. And she kind of paused. And then when I didn't respond, she said, and we talked for 2 hours. And again, I didn't respond. You know, I have a wife and daughters, and they get on the phone with each other, and, you know, they can talk for a long time. And so I didn't, you know, that didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. And she said, no, you don't understand. My mother never calls because we hate each other, and within 30 seconds, we're screaming at each other. But I got home after my appointment last week, the phone rang, it was my mother, and we talked for 2 hours. She said that was really nothing short of a miracle. Now, I thought about that since then, and I thought, you know, if I had known that, and I picked up the phone and called her mother and said, would you like to have a better relationship with your daughter? Undoubtedly, her mother would have said, yes, I do. And if I had said to the daughter, would you like to have a better relationship with your mother? She would have said, yes. And then I would have said, well, why don't you then? I mean, this is stupid to hate each other when you both want to have a better relationship. Well, that would have been the wrong thing to say, because the reason they didn't have a better relationship is because they couldn't perceive a way to have a better relationship. The perception reframe changed the energy posture of the young woman, and that directly impacted her mother, and it allowed for this interaction to happen. I've had this kind of thing happen lots of times, and it's just not surprising to me anymore, but it's always fun to see. Another time, I had a woman who was probably in her 40s come into the clinic, and she had suffered from chronic pain for 20, 25 years. Again, went through the normal stuff, and we started into the EVOX. We started to treat her pain, the acupuncture, the massage, the supplements, the chiropractic. And in the course of doing EVOX, I learned, not that she told me, but it just kind of came out in her conversation as she was talking about her family. I learned that she had grown up in probably one of the most dysfunctional families you could imagine. You know, her father was an alcoholic. Her parents were always at each other's throat. Her siblings were abusive to her. I mean, it was just like the childhood from hell. And the problem with that was she grew up with some incredibly misinformed beliefs. She carried from her childhood, and this is my clinical opinion, she carried with her the belief that this dysfunction was her fault. And the chronic pain she was experiencing was punishment for the things that she thought she was responsible for as a child. Now, she didn't know that at a conscious level. She wasn't doing this consciously. But these perceptions play with us at a subconscious level, and it's really our subconscious that drives us. And so her experience run through those perceptions, creating the energetic response and the emotion, it was screwing up her energy and screwing up the function. And the problem with not addressing the emotional piece is at a subconscious level, she was sabotaging herself. I mean, this woman she spent tens of thousands of dollars in some of the country's most famous clinics trying to solve her pain problem, and nobody could help her. And when we got in and started working with her with EVOX and doing the other things that we normally do to treat pain, in 3 weeks, this woman was completely out of pain. Now, the reason that happened is because we cleared the emotional roadblock. We cleared the subconscious sabotage that was occurring, that was keeping her in pain. She no longer was, guilty for stuff that she really wasn't responsible for. So emotions have an incredibly powerful part to play in life and in patient care. And the reason why EVOX results are so profound is because, again, perception creates reality. And if you reframe a perception, you create a new reality. I think that's my last slide. It is my last slide. And I don't know what, I'm fast. I was supposed to go for another few minutes, but.
Hey, that was amazing. I was supposed to do a couple other things while we were talking. I didn't have time. I couldn't take my ears or eyes off of you. That's amazing. So will you have one of these available at homecoming where people can be tested on it?
We will. We'll have EVOX. We'll also have our scanning technology. So, and this, as Dr. John mentioned, we'll be there Thursday evening, and we'll be there for the entire time. And there'll be lots of time to, I hope there'll be lots of time to come and get a scan, and we can show you the bells and whistles and the functionality. And
how long does it take to do an EVOX evaluation?
I schedule a half hour with the patient. As you do it, you actually, I don't know what happens, but you actually get faster at it. I can generally, when I do EVOX, because I've done enough of it, in 3 to 5 rounds, which means I can reframe in about 15 minutes. But I schedule a half hour for people, and that usually handles one session.
And what's a normal charge a doctor would make for a patient with that?
It varies. We've got doctors that charge as little as $40. We have some that charge as much as $375. Wow. I think the average is probably around $75 a session. That's what I used to charge.
And from your experience, how many sessions does it take to normally get a response from a patient? I know sometimes we need instant miracles, and sometimes we beat our head against the wall working with patients, but what's been your experience? If you treated 10 patients in 10, how long would it take on average the 10 patients to feel better, or percentage of them?
You always get a response. So let me give you an example. A patient comes in with low back pain. Because I know that there could be an emotional piece attached to this low back pain, I will say to them, I want you to do an EVOX session, and I want you to tell me about your low back pain. And so they tell me about the low back pain, and we reframe on the low back pain. Once it's reframed, I know that the emotional attachment to the back pain has been released, and I will now be more successful as I treat that pain. So you never have to, you always get a positive response. Sometimes the progress is incremental. In other words, you don't always get a miracle. You don't always get mom calling you the afternoon you go home and you talk for 2 hours, but you always will get a positive response.
What percentage of your patients think there's a relationship to something EVOX might help? In other words, if you see 10 patients, will all 10 of them have some kind of emotional connection to the problem?
Yeah, every disease process has an emotional component.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what we've been teaching and preaching now for this marks my 48th year come March. So You've been around maybe not quite that long, but we both played this game for a long time. Let me just tell everybody a quick experience that I had. I was flying from here to England over on some business here a few years ago, and I had a bunch of air miles, so I traded a first class seat going to England, and it's a place where you sit in the chair and it flows into a bed. In the 14 hours you go down, it was wonderful. I was sitting up there and I had my acupuncture chart sitting there, and I was doing pulse diagnosis, and the stewardess came up and said, "Are you worried? Are you kind of worried about flying?" I said, "Oh no, I'm just an acupuncturist, and I'm checking my own acupuncture points and I'm studying the meridians. I just need to know more about it." And she said, "I have this problem." So I know one of the MDs I've lectured with through the years says he never admits he's a doctor on the plane. He always says he repairs and maintains mobile food processing units, which is a person. But I said I was happy to check her out, and we did. We balanced her out emotionally. I didn't have an e-box, but I did the same kind of thing. One question you always ask is, what was going on in your life at the time this problem started? He says, "I don't know." I said, "Well, have you been through death, divorce, or taxes?" She said, "Yes, almost all of those, but particularly I had a divorce." And I said, "What was the divorce?" And she thought, "Oh my gosh, it was about the same time this problem happened." She had a severe pain. She got a rash all over her body. And the crazy part was, excuse me, her son had exactly the same thing. So I did an emotional clearing technique with her, uh, like what the evox would do, but it takes time to do it. This is so cool that you have an instrument that magnifies your ability to change things. For me, it's taken a lot of years to be able to move somebody through like that. We made major changes with her. She felt better, but it only took me, maybe 20 minutes. We were waiting to take off, so I got to go back to work. We visited a couple of times on the flight, so they gave me extra service. That was great. And about 3 months later, I get a phone call. I'm back home here in Arizona, and I get this call with this deep English accent. She said, "Remember me? I was your stewardess on the flight." I said, "I do. How are you doing?" She says, "The strangest thing happened." She said, "By the time we landed, I felt better. I told you that. But by the time I had spent a couple of days at home, my rash was gone, my pain was gone." And she said, "I just can't thank you enough." We said, "That's not the end of it. My son cleared up at the same time. You didn't even treat him." So what Dr. Cook is saying here, what I'm saying here is there's no such thing as a problem without an emotional component. And if you can identify that emotional component and clear it, you get better results with everything else. That's what we've always talked about, all 6 steps, and how we like to balance them at the same time. Some of you may not have had a way to clear it out emotionally that you felt comfortable with. You're too busy adjusting or doing acupuncture or something of that nature. And you can have a trained personnel do this, right, Dr. Cook?
Right. That's the advantage of evox, is that you don't get involved in the process. This is not talk therapy. Uh, if because an example, the young woman who had the problem with her mother, I had no idea she had a problem with her mother. But just having her, say my mother is, here's her name, she's this tall, her foot size is this, she weighs this much, her eye color is this. Boom, the computer records that, and it plots the pattern, the perception of her mother, and you change that, and it just, it makes the difference. So you don't have to
start.
You don't have to be there with the patient all the time. You can have a technician help you with this,
Right.
and they don't, they're not asking revealing questions or anything else from people.
If a patient came in with back pain, or a patient came in threatening divorce, or a patient came in with a rash, would there be a different place you would start on the eVox with each one of these people, or is there a set place you start with people?
No, it's different with different people. One of the challenges is to educate patients to the point where they're willing to do eVox. But so that's where I'll start with, somebody, the back pain instance. It's really easy to have somebody sit down and just talk about their back pain because they know that's why they're there. But lots of times I had patients who came in with marital problems. I mean, I've had married couples who come in so angry with each other that I was concerned they would actually physically harm each other while they were in the clinic. And they go through the transgenerational reframe protocol, and by the end they were so back in love it was sickening. It was like, oh gosh, you kids go get a room somewhere.
I love it.
That happens over a few weeks, that protocol does. But I've treated guys with post-traumatic stress disorder, and eVox is is a huge piece of that. I remember one engaged couple who came in, and we ran them through the protocol, and they just called their marriage off. They decided, we're just not right for each other. We're not going to get married. And I said, well, it's easier to get not married than divorced. So, you probably saved yourself some money by coming in. But it really is amazing. I mean, I've had doctors, as I've taught seminars on this. I was in Florida a number of years ago, and a doctor from New York was volunteered to be the guinea pig. And I said, well, what do you want to do a reframe on? He said, I'd like to have more money in my practice. So I said, great. We sat down, went through a session. 20 minutes later, he had reframed. The next week, the middle of the week, he called me in my office and he said, he said, the strangest things happen. And when I hear that, I always know I'm in for a good story. He said, I opened the door to my clinic on Monday after I came back from Florida, and the phone has not stopped ringing. He said, I'm booked out almost 3 months now. And that's because he reframed. Most of the reasons we don't receive things is because our perception or our energetic posture is such that we resist what the universe or God is wanting to give to us. But if we change our energetic posture, we then open ourselves up to receive, and that's what happens.
Hey, this goes along so with what I have found in my 48 years of practice and with thousands of patients. We are like a computer. I heard Dr. Goodhart and another doctor argue about whether we were a hologram or whether we were a computer. What I found is we are a hologramic biocomputer. Everything that's ever happened to us, even in this generation or generation before us, is recorded like it's recorded in a computer. And like a computer, if you can highlight what happened, you can erase it. And you can type in there what you want to have happen in the future. That's exactly what you've been able to do with eBlock. You can rewrite the script so you can be happy, you can be healthy, you can be prosperous. And we'll demonstrate at homecoming. We'll bring maybe 5 people up on the stage, and we'll say, one person say, I'm okay with getting $1 million, and see if they stay strong. They might stay strong, but that statement tested any muscle of the body. Somebody else says, I'm strong, making $1 million. They go completely weak. They can't even make over $50,000 a year, and they make every muscle in their body go weak. And when they're next to the person who's okay with making $1 million, they'll make them go weak. We reprogram everybody at the same time, like we can do with the eBox, but you have to know the technique. This way, you need Dr. eBox to do the walking, and everybody could stay strong to $1 million. And your goal may not be $1 million, but whatever that goal is, you don't have to be hindered by wrong programming. And I think that's what we're talking about here. The eBox allows your body to realize the bad programming and to open up where it becomes correct. It doesn't force you to do anything. It just allows you to relieve just restriction. Like we were taught in chiropractic school, the body needs no help to get well. It just needs no interference. And you figured out a way to relieve emotional programming interference. It's very exciting.
It's amazing stuff. I often tell people, even if I never saw patients, I still see patients occasionally, but even if I never saw patients, I would own an eBox because it's that valuable to me personally.
Well, this has been very, very good, Doc. I really appreciate it. The first time you and I got to talk this long in 15 years. So this has been very exciting for me, and I listen to every word. I look forward to hearing you. We got an hour program for you at homecoming, and these will be demonstrated all the way on Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before we close show. So we invite anybody that's listening to our voice to come January 3, 4, 5, and 6 to Phoenix. Just call brimhall.com. That's simple enough. If you don't know the phone number, it's 480-964-5198. 480-964-5198. Or even more simple is go to Brimhall, like the brim of a hat, BRIMHALL, brimhall.com. And it tells about the seminar, the different things that we do, all the many year research that we have with our alliances with eBox and Zyto, along with Dr. Cook and many of the people we work with. So at homecoming, you're going to get to see one of the best chiropractic adjusters, trainers, and tapers of problems, Dr. Smaldon, Dr. Patrick Porter, who works with his equipment to change emotional concept. Talk about that with the eBox. My gosh, that's really exciting. And he'll be having 2 different workshops, plus his people will be out there. They take up half the room out there with all the people they bring to make sure you eat to experience the brain tap instruments. And then we'll be doing acupuncture. We have Curtis Turchin, who's an acupuncturist. He's actually has some patents that he's developed in how to use light therapy for adjusting and healing. And you'll have Dr. John Mooney there and Dr. Randy Rinklip also, who are innovators in the laser fields and be testing you as often or as much as you want to have out there. Dr. Brett has an integrative practice he'll be teaching. Myself, Dr. Harris, who is I don't know what he is. He's not from this planet. Graduated from high school at 7, college at 9, and before his 12th birthday, he graduated with 3 PhDs, an MD, and an ND. Actually, it was 4 PhDs because he claimed biology because it was too easy. So he has the audacity to have a photographic memory, and you say that's impossible to do that. And for a human, it is. For him, it's not. And so you'll hear him unlavish 15,000 pages he read on the genetic code, and he's developed a step-by-step procedure to release the epigenetic problems by monitoring very high quality technique that we use. And I'm sure the e-box would make changes along with the Zyto, along with the very specific nutrition that we use to do that. And so that's just some of the people that will be speaking out there, but you won't be bored. You won't get to sleep because we start early in the morning, we go to late at night, and out in the hallway, we have all this incredible minds out there, like Dr. Dennis Harper will be there. He's speaking as well. And he's Mr. Stem Cell or Biological Allograft out there. He teaches people to live to be 139. And he actually believes he's going to make that. He's a little younger than I am. He's only 60 something. I mean, just a kid. But he believes he's going to live to be 139 by allowing our stem cells to work better. Be it you take it by oral nutrition, like we have OptiStem Cell, versus the injection of biological allografts. And so he and I and Dr. Harris and Dr. Mora are teaching different seminars around the country, teaching you how to become younger again. Talk about anti-aging medicine. It absolutely is, by helping the body produce its own stem cells. Well, we don't want to go any longer. Dr. Cook, again, we thank you so much for being here. I could hardly wait. I've been checked for a couple of years on the e-box. I want you to straighten me out. I'm sure my wife would appreciate it. And we
Yes, I'm sure she will.
Invite everybody to come and see you January 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th here in Tempe, Arizona. You fly into the Phoenix airport, and it's just about a 15-minute ride over there. So if they have any questions, how would they contact you through Zyto? Dr. Cook at Zyto.com, is that correct?
Yeah, that's my email address, where they could just go to the website. They could, they may want to talk to one of our salesmen or one of our coaches. We're happy to.
Zyto.com?
We're happy to.
Zyto.com.
Yeah, Zyto.com.
Well, that's one thing we have in common. We keep it real simple. Brimhall.com and Zyto.com.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks again for being here. Thank all of you for joining us. And those of you be seeing this on LinkedIn and Facebooks and the puzzle pieces that will go out next week. We have Dr. Cook send a little more information along with it. We look forward to seeing you in January here in Arizona. Bye-bye.
Thanks.